Your last assignment for this week is called Applying Scientific Methods. And what I'm asking you to do is open the Scientific Methods document, which I'll do now. You can see it opens in a separate window. And if you're not aware that you can do this on your netbook, if you pull the tab down and then drag that window across, you can actually see two screens at the same time, which makes things a little easier to view and deal with. So here we have our assignment on the left and the actual worksheet that goes with the assignment on the right. So what it says in your directions over here, read the information at the top of the page carefully. So take a look at the information you are to read. It says, have you ever reached into your pocket for your keys only to discover that they weren't there? What actions did you take in such situations? Did you just assume they magically vanished into thin air? Chances are you expected a logical solution and then proceeded through a series of steps to locate the keys. First, your mind may have raced as you hypothesized about several places the keys could be. Next, you individually tested each hypothesis and gathered data by looking around the house. If the keys were found, the problem was solved. If not, another hypothesis about the key's location had to be formed. In essence, you went through a process of discovery that is very similar to the approach scientists use to solve problems, called the scientific method. Everyday life is filled with problems and questions that sometimes perplex us, but that have logical solutions. The natural world is no exception. In this activity, you'll apply the scientific methods to solve some everyday applications in biology. So if you take a look over here at last week's assignment, and if you followed through the video, if you listened to what I had to say, we went over the scientific method. We went over the parts of it. We went over a general order for the scientific method, and you answered some questions. What I'm asking you to do is read Part A of this worksheet called Applying Scientific Methods, and then apply what you learned about variables and about running an experiment to this new situation. So your questions for the assignment are down here. There are 5 of them. Only 2 questions appear on the actual worksheet. What you really need to focus on are the situation under Part A and the figures that you see here, the plants. So your questions to answer are, which plants represent the control group? Explain your answer. Number 2, which plants represent the experimental group, and how do you know? Number 3, what were the independent variables? Number 4, what were the dependent variables? And number 5, which variables were controlled? So let's take a look over here at the situation. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so it's easier for you to read. Part A, the following describes an experiment to determine the effect of additional nitrogen, that's important, on plant growth. Read the paragraph carefully, then answer the questions. So additional nitrogen is a key term that you need to remember. Dr. Anderson set up an experiment in which she planted bean seeds in 2 groups, A and B. After the seeds germinated, Group A was fed a balanced application of fertilizer with additional nitrogen. So Group A got additional nitrogen. And you can see here, this is what Group A looked like, as was recommended by most plant growers. Group B was grown under identical conditions, except the fertilizer they received contained no additional nitrogen. Dr. Anderson observed the plants for 1 month, and you can see the results in Figure 1. So what I'm asking you to do is think about the scientific method. Think about what you learned over here in this presentation. Think about what you learned about independent variables, dependent variables, controls, and then apply that to this plant experiment. Think about which plants represent the control group. Remember, the control group is the group where everything is normal, like you would find it in the natural world or under the original conditions, so that you have something to compare your experimental results to. So which group? Group A, that received additional nitrogen in their fertilizer, or group B that did not receive additional nitrogen would be the control group, would be the natural group, the normal group. And then explain your answer, explain why. Number 2, which plants represent the experimental group and how do you know? If you recall from the presentation before, the experimental group is the one that gets that independent variable, that gets the factor that you are testing the effect of. What are we testing the effect of in this plant experiment? Are we testing the effect of additional fertilizer or additional nitrogen in the fertilizer? Number 3, what were the independent variables? In this case, we have one independent variable. Think about what factor was given to one group but not the other one. That identifies your independent variable. Number 4, what were the dependent variables? Okay, remember from our presentation about the scientific method that a dependent variable is what you test or measure as a result of the independent variable. If you identified the independent variable, how did you know that it worked or did not work? And number 5, which variables were controlled? Notice in the paragraph it says both groups were grown under identical conditions except for the fertilizer they received contained no additional nitrogen. So what were those? I want you to list some identical conditions that the plants would need to be under in order to control every other factor except for the fertilizer with extra nitrogen. If you were growing 2 sets of plants and testing this fertilizer with nitrogen versus fertilizer without nitrogen, what other factors would you have to control? Think about what plants need to grow. Think about location. Think about conditions they were growing under. And that's what you're listing as your answer for number 5. As always, if you have any questions about your assignment, please make sure you email me or call me. Email's faster. I can reply sooner for sure. But if you call, I'd certainly be happy to talk to you if I have a chance. All right.